But a lot of the issues really come down to just like it depends on what our customer is currently brewing on, if they've ever even brewed the beer before themselves, all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, it's one thing to, go from our pilot system to our 30-barrel system, and we've done it with all sorts of different beers over and over and over again. We kind of know the differences between those two systems, but when you're introducing a third system that, none of us have actually brewed on or had any experience with that, it really just comes down to asking a whole lot of questions about exactly how they're brewing their beers at wherever they currently are. Like, for example, we know here that when we do a Whirlpool edition on our pilot system, the wort has not really cooled down all that much, so we know we're going to be getting more bitterness from a Whirlpool edition than one would traditionally expect on our pilot system. So we know to adjust that when we're going up to the 30-barrel system. But that's an example of something we'd be asking the customer, kind of, here's your recipe, say these are your Whirlpool hops, your knockout hops, or whatever they are. But is the beer really cooled at that point, or is it just kind of slowly free-falling from just below a boil during that period of time? And then, of course, you also have just general efficiencies and kind of the almost unexplained differences that come from the fact that it's a biological process and all the numbers can read the same at the beginning and cell counts can look good, and you might wind up at a slightly different finishing gravity, and we may have to go back and talk about the grain bill or how we can adjust and that sort of thing. It's basically just knowing our system and trying to learn as much about their system that they're brewing on. And we also get to kind of take advantage of the economy of scale a little bit that a lot of these places don't get to take advantage of. For example, we have our silo with 2-row. That lasts us quite a while, so you know exactly what's going in. We know if it's slightly different than the silo before, so for these breweries that we're brewing the same beer several times, we know we're using the same ingredients and we can rely on that, whereas some of these smaller places are much more used to just buying things on the spot market, or they might have overbought and they're using grains that are older than they should be, all that sort of thing.
I was going to get to that and ask you about that with different types of systems. Do you see, and I don't think when I say different types of systems, I'm talking about maybe it does not manufacturers or something like that, but just the different sizes. Like where's the biggest change happen if you're going from, say, a 5-barrel or a 3-barrel to a 30-barrel or a 7-barrel to a 20-barrel? Where do you see the biggest fluctuations and that cause the biggest problems, at least when you're trying to scale up?
A lot of it is kind of like these people are locked in. They know the efficiencies on their systems pretty well, and they'll give us a recipe, and it kind of comes down to our head brewer looking over the recipe and saying, I know that I get this many gravity points from this many pounds of 2-row, and it looks like you guys are going to be just off or something like that. So the biggest thing is always going to be efficiency. There's a lot of tiny little smaller players in there as well, such as, the efficiency might be similar, but due to the way the grain bed's set up, you can be pulling slightly different percentages of the longer chains or things like that, even if you're mashing at the exact same temperature as you are on a different system. So it's definitely one of those things where it's just usually a conversation between our head brewer and their brewer over there to try to translate, here's our recipe, but here are the numbers we're really trying to hit. And our head brewer will go through and adjust the percentages how he sees fit and kind of get them to sign off on the slight tweaks on the recipe. So a lot of it we can do ahead of time and kind of make the tweaks and hope we get closer to the numbers than we would have with the recipe they had initially given us.
And I kind of asked this earlier, malt bills seem to be a little easier to adjust as long as, like you said, it's within the same range of type of grain and things like that. But when it comes to Does that seem to be pretty much the easiest part to translate over versus other aspects?
Yeah, definitely. It's certainly kind of the language that the brewers that we're contracting for speak the best, to say we need to pull out a little grain, our gravity's too high, or whatever it is. It's kind of the easiest to discuss with a client as well.
How about the post game after it's made? You guys are going through that QA process and making sure that you're taste testing what they made is translating into what you made. How are some of those things when a brewery, whether they're scaling them up from their moving a new system within their brewery or working with a contract partner? What is the best tasting notes to be able to discover whether or not it might be number-wise fine, but it could be a little bit different product, and how do you find the adjustments for the midway point there?
A lot of the time we really serve the full spectrum from brewing beers that this is literally the first time it's ever been brewed, to brewing beers that we can go and grab a can that was canned on the exact same day at another location, brewed elsewhere, and kind of get a really authentic side-by-side tasting. So for the customers that are kind of bigger and, we can get our hands on fresh beer produced somewhere else, we'll like to do side-by-side tastings on those. For beer that we're producing over and over again for a customer, we'll generally taste each batch alongside with the batch before. And we also kind of have a whole lot of, bumpers on the numbers that we're aiming for. And the second that our gravity's a little high or pH looks a little out of spec or anything like that, we will reach out to the individual breweries and kind of get, if they're close enough, they'll come in and they'll actually sign off on the tasting as well. But I guess really what it comes down to is, having a team of people who can recognize off flavors and different things like that, and just the consistency of the tasting, I think, is more important than anything. Just making sure that everybody is tasting everything that's coming through and tasting it alongside something that should be a representative sample. It's rare that I'll do like a more traditional sensory analysis, difference testing, or anything like that. That would be kind of only if there was a severe red flag, which, knock on wood, we've avoided for the most part. But those are definitely in the bag of tools. I have in the past at previous workplaces definitely leaned on those when it's one of those things that, internally people are like, this tastes different, but then once you actually get a solid statistical number on it, you realize, well, nobody can actually tell the difference. This is all in our heads. It's definitely just having a team that can recognize off flavors, and I'll do different trainings with them as part of these tastings that we're doing, tasting all the beer that we've packaged in the past week. Occasionally I will sneak in an off-flavor spike or something like that just to keep them on their toes, or rather than comparing it to the previous batch, I'll compare it to a out-of-date can or something like that to kind of make sure that they truly don't know exactly what they're testing, or tasting rather, and they can get a totally open, honest opinion on what's going on.
Is there a system or a size or a brewing, not like I said, not manufacturer, but maybe a certain type of system that you just hate switching from, say it be whether it's steam jacketed or direct fire, to whatever you guys have? Is there a difference when it comes to the type of manufactured product that is coming from and you're scaling to what you guys do? What do you guys have on your 30 barrel?
Yeah, we're steam jacketed. We've got a calandria, and yeah, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a certain type of system that makes it more difficult than us, because like I said, we've gotten pretty well used to asking all the right questions to try and figure out what those differences might be from our system. The bigger issue will usually come from either like a disconnect in that company or just a really young new brewery that doesn't have the answer to all those questions, and we're not able to go over and find the answers out for ourselves. But places that maybe are contracting at a different location and have been pretty hands-off for a while, it can be hard to figure out exactly what's going on those systems. And then also just kind of the really small systems, people brewing on single barrel systems and things like that. That generally takes quite a bit of reworking on our end for them to scale it up to what they're expecting to have.
Well, cool. Well, sounds like things are going well, and I appreciate you guys reaching out and wanting to talk a little bit about this.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Have a good one.
Have a good one.